Your beat, so to speak, is science, technology, and business management. How did you come to specialize in those particular areas?
Well, not through any carefully planned way, that's for sure. At some point, I just sort of realized I was there. I did what most people would consider sort of a strange thing. I majored in physics in college with no intention of getting an advanced degree. A bachelor's in physics is a fairly useless degree. But it did at some point occur to me that it might be sort of a nice way to help bridge the gap a little bit between what some very, very smart people in the world were doing and the public, which generally really isn't tapped into what happens, for example, in the physics world. So I did find myself at some point sort of explaining what physicists do for a lay audience, and that was a lot of fun.
Now, many people may be familiar with your Inc. magazine column, What's Next, but your work also appears in a number of other publications, including the New York Times, Science, Wired, just to name a few. Your columns tend to be sort of challenging conventional wisdom oftentimes, or a bit contrarian. Why is that the case?
Probably the most honest answer is that because it's fun. But on the other hand, I would also say that I think that if a journalist isn't out there trying to say to people, wait a minute, a lot of what you're hearing is wrong, then why do we need journalists? I mean, I don't think we need journalists to simply echo what everybody knows anyway and what everybody else is saying. And so I think the most important thing a journalist can do is present another point of view. So for me, I'm very comfortable being a contrarian. And it may also have something to do with my terrible personality. Maybe I'm just a little confrontational.
Now, you do write about things that we often fret about, or we should fret about if we knew more about them. How do you decide what to write about and how to approach it?
There is absolutely no rhyme or reason to how I get ideas and where they come from. They really seem to pop out of the air. Typically, I'll be talking to somebody, having a conversation, and they'll say something interesting. I'll read something. Often, it's an idea that pops up in somebody else's writing, something I'll agree with or disagree with, and I think, well, this one paragraph here is worth zooming in on. Sometimes I really have absolutely no clue what made me think of that. People are very, very fascinated with the question of where journalists come up with the ideas for their articles, I've found out. And I have to say, I've never really heard an intelligent answer to that question.
So I'm sorry I asked it. No.
It's a good question. There's just no smart answer.
There is so much contradictory information out there. For instance, one week we should take certain vitamins and they'll prevent heart disease. The next week those things may actually increase the risk. So what is your advice to consumers of science, technology, and business type information?
My advice is be very careful about taking advice. The fact that you see contradictory advice tells you something right there. You don't have to know that something is wrong if you have two people saying exactly the opposite things. You know at least one of them is wrong. And I would argue that in those cases probably both of them are wrong. And the phenomenon you're really seeing here is that we live in a complex world where there aren't simple answers like you should take a baby aspirin a day, you should not eat this, you should eat this. In fact, some very, very complex things are going on. Different things work for different people. We don't understand the vast majority of it. We never have. We think we do now, but we don't. We'll look back 10 years from now and laugh at what we thought now. And the fact that people want to come out and give this kind of simple, do this advice, we love hearing it because we can do something about it. It's almost always wrong. And so I say people try to get the other side of things, use your common sense.
Now, the conventional wisdom right now is that if you are an employer and your employers are sitting on their computers surfing the web, they are probably wasting time. You say not so.
Yes, I say quite the opposite. And in fact, we live in a world now where a lot of stuff is happening on the web. And the younger generation understands. I mean, I'm 52, but kids coming up now in their 20s, they are so wired into the web that they recognize that a lot of the important changes we're going to be seeing in the next decade or two are really happening right now on the web. And the way they get this is they surf the web. And for an employer to say to them, I'm cutting you off. I mean, first of all, they're not going to appreciate that, and it's going to make it hard for you to keep good employees. So right off the bat, you got a problem right there. But in addition to that, you're cutting your employees off, if you crack down on web surfing, on one of the greatest sources of information that they can possibly have. And it may not seem obvious how surfing on the web and going to various goofy websites may actually help your company, but I think there's a very good chance it will. A lot of companies are moving to social networking things online, finding new ways to plug into the web, and it'll be these young people who do all their web surfing that'll show us how to do it.
Well, it's these same young people, teenagers, who will be running the business as a generation from now, who have absolutely no qualms about putting personal information out on the web. And there are lots of people who are concerned about the impact of technology and privacy issues.
That's true, and this is going to be, we're going to be seeing a lot of changes on this. And really, there have been a lot of changes already. I grew up at a time when, and even up to a decade ago, where one thing that almost everybody agreed on is we didn't want either the government or corporations tracking us in any way, shape, or form. We didn't trust them with that information. We thought they would do bad things with it, that if the government had a lot of information on it, they would use it to suppress free speech or political expression. If corporations had it, they would find some insidious way to sneak things into our lives in some way, to steal money from us in some way. It's no longer seen that way, at least by a younger generation. They readily give up their privacy every time they surf on the web, or we surf on the web. We're being tracked. We're leaving a trail of what we're interested in, what we read, what we want to buy. And especially younger people, but more and more of us, kind of like the idea that now companies can give us the information we want. The government can find us in an emergency. The government can do a better job of finding criminals with video cameras all over the place. Unthinkable 10 years ago. We laughed at London for having all those video cameras. We're all doing it ourselves now. We can't wait.
But rather than Big Brother kinds of worries with this privacy and then being able to find us, Google and Yahoo and compiling all of this information, they've got this tremendous tool to sell us stuff.
That's right. That's exactly. And this used to really creep us out. But the fact is, for one thing, advertising has gotten a lot more interesting. Advertisers have been faced with a crisis of their own of people being able to skip through ads with TiVo, for example, and not click on things on the web. They've become compelled to give us advertising that matters to us more. Advertising that's either more entertaining or maybe quicker, or it's better targeted to what we as individuals care about. And all of a sudden, a lot of people are finding they actually choose to watch ads. I find it happening to me all the time. And if companies can get away with it, I'm not sure that's a bad thing.
Well, with all of the capability for this ultra-personalized information that's now available to us, describe, if you would, a trip to the grocery store in the future. What do you foresee?
Well, I think it's entirely possible that you walk down an aisle and some of the packaging will actually talk to you. You could do that today. It's actually really easy. It's not expensive. You could build a little chip into a cereal box that would call you by name. It would be wirelessly tied into a network that knows you like certain kinds of cereal. You usually go and buy Life cereal, and as you walk by, the Special K will talk to you, "Hey Dave, you know, we're having a special today, and did you know that there are 30% less calories in me than there are in the other guy?" And you know what? We might enjoy hearing it. Now, it might get kind of ridiculous if everything's yelling out at you, and we saw some of this in the movie Minority Report did a nice job of sort of portraying that. But I think networking and cheap kinds of imaging and audio equipment will make all this a reality.
Now, you've written a lot over the years about our decades-long war on cancer, and despite decades of fighting cancer, we're still killing about 7 million people worldwide are dying of cancer. Why, based on your investigations, have we not done a better job of winning this war on cancer?
Yeah, and let me start off by saying there have been some journalists who have really done a much better job than me at looking into this. So I've really borrowed on their work a little bit to comment on it. But first of all, I mean, it's even worse than most people think. The survival rate for cancers, excluding things like very early diagnosis, for adults, for almost all cancers, hasn't budged since the 1950s. We've made almost zero progress. And one of the problems with this, one of the reasons this has happened, is the way the cancer research community operates is they tend to get these ideas of how cancer works that are wrong.
And they stick to them.
And they stick to them. It becomes the operating model for how cancer works. And it's the only way you're going to get funding for your research is if you work according to this model. And scientists who work outside of the model are branded as, well, just people who don't know what they're talking about and they can't get funding. So, and the model keeps changing. They thought it was a virus. They thought it was all environmental. Now they think it's a small set of genes that have to be found. It's wrong. And research proves it's wrong. And until scientists start taking a more open-minded view and a more practical view of how to track down cancer, I don't think we're going to see much progress.
You've looked at so many issues in your career. I want to end with this. Is it possible, in your mind, to envision the sweeping technological advances that we see happening almost every day without the attendant downsides that we always worry about?
Yes, I absolutely think it's possible that we could enter into some sort of technological utopia. I think the chances of that happening are slim. I think, history teaches us everything has its downsides, and I think we're really going to see that in the years to come. We see it happening now. It's interesting to see the younger generation growing up so accepting of so many things that we always found so horrifying. So it may be that we end up in a world that the people who are young now think is just fine, and those of us who are older now and live to survive to see it may be absolutely horrified. We may just not agree on whether it's a good world or not.
All right. It was nice talking with you.
It was a pleasure.
A copy of the program you've just seen can be purchased through Penn State Media Sales at mediasales.psu.edu or by calling 800-770-2111.